You're listening to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, aimed at helping photographers learn how to make the leap from amateur to pro. Hello, and welcome to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, a joint effort brought to you by Photofocus and Skip Cohen University. This is Shamira Young, and I'm joined by my co-host and triple threat, Skip Cohen.
Wow.
Do you want to
help me where the triple threat is? Yes.
You are a podcaster, obviously. You
Yes.
are a marketing expert, and you're a photographic artist.
Wow. Okay, triple threat.
How's that?
I've never been a triple threat, although I do remember as a kid my mother triple threatening me numerous times for stupid things I did. Hey, This is fun to be here today because it isn't very often. In fact, I'm trying to think. Have we done? Yes, we've done. We've done a couple of podcasts over the last. Shamira and I have been doing these different podcasts since March of 2017. So,
Wow.
For the last 3 years, we've had a few that were overseas. But today's guest is based out of Brisbane, Australia, and we've got Kelly Brown in the Mind Your Own Business house today. And what a kick to get her to join us from literally the other side of the world. In fact, we're recording this at 6 o'clock in the evening, and it's 8 o'clock in the morning for her. So she's just getting started on her day, and we're just wrapping it up. Now, if you don't know Kelly, she's an award-winning photographer. She's an educator. She's a writer. She has what's probably become the most successful online series of educational programs for artists interested in newborn photography. It's huge. She's also a great friend to so many photographers in the industry, especially in the WPPI family. And having spent a weekend with her and her husband, Rob, in California a few months ago, she couldn't be more down to earth, easy to talk to, and absolutely 100% legitimately passionate about this industry. So, Kelly, if I haven't screwed something up or said something wrong, welcome to Mind Your Own Business.
Oh, thank you. That was quite the introduction.
Well, I didn't go into any of the side stories, so I promised you I wouldn't bring up any in jokes here.
Oh, thank you. It is it's quite the honor to be here. I've actually, this is my very first podcast I've been a part of, so I'm excited. Yeah.
Wow.
Honored.
Well, like you said, it is 8 o'clock in the morning here. So if you hear a little background noise, it might be some cockatoos flying past in the trees outside my house, or a couple of dogs, naughty dogs.
or any one of several teenagers wandering into the wrong room of the house.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I have 3 of those, and hopefully they're still asleep.
Kelly, we are so honored to be your first podcast.
Wow.
And we are so excited to have this fun conversation with you. I mean, your work is amazing. Your experience with teaching online is amazing. We can't wait to get into it. We do like to start with our first question. Can you give us an overview of your background, your journey, just how you got started and how you ended up doing what you're doing today?
Yeah. It was probably 2003 that I literally picked up my very first camera. We were expecting our first baby. I was working for a construction company at the time, and I had to do a lot of documenting of the project that we were currently working on, and had to go out into the field and take photographs. And I literally had no idea what I was doing in terms of, what was correct and what wasn't correct. And then when our baby arrived, I was instantly drawn to obviously trying to document every single day with her. And my husband, very, very gently said to me, perhaps you should learn how to take a decent photo. So I enrolled in a night class, and my baby was 6 weeks old, and I was studying photography at night while he was home from work. And I think, like most photographers, you become very addicted to the craft. You're always wanting to take a better photo every time you pick up that camera. So for me, it was, something that I just fell in love with instantly, and I just couldn't stop. So one course led to the next, and it was a couple of years later that I welcomed twins. I had a little bit more downtime because at that point I'd started offering family portrait sessions. I was doing some weddings. I even had a side gig working for an architectural company that designed staircases in the most amazing locations like hotels and penthouses and things like that. So I would often just sort of, pack up my gear, my tripod, and off I'd go to photograph staircases, as boring as that sounds. And then when my twins arrived, I couldn't work for quite a while, having 3 babies under 3. So I studied again and did my diploma of photography, which I absolutely loved. So that was in 2006. And yeah, it's kind of just been this ongoing sort of process, and it hasn't really stopped since then. But yeah, I focused a lot on weddings and family portraits, like I said, and then it wasn't until probably about 12 years ago that I started photographing babies and became quite passionate about that. And it wasn't that I loved it more than any other area. It was probably more of a business decision at the time, because I had 3 children, a husband that worked away, and it just sort of fitted because parents were having those first 2 weeks off, off work, obviously the husband, to stay at home with the new baby. So I was able to get my clients in Monday to Friday between, normal working hours, which is when my children went to childcare 3 days a week. So it sort of just worked, and it came quite naturally, I suppose. I've always been surrounded by babies my whole entire life. So it was more of a business decision to focus purely on newborn photography at the time. And gosh, looking back, I would never have expected it had sort of come this far, and I'd be, traveling the world and to amazing cities and countries and teaching other photographers how to do it and run successful businesses. So yeah, it's been a pretty amazing journey.
I know Rob is involved in certain parts of the business. When did that come about in terms of Rob getting involved?
Well, he's actually been with me now for 6 years. So he spent just over 20 years in the construction industry. And I mean, for those of you that have ever worked in the construction industry, it's usually very, very long hours. We're sort of talking, up at 4 a.m. and home at sort of 6:30 p.m. at night. And for probably 3 years prior to him joining me, he was what they call fly in, fly out, so only home every second weekend, which was a big strain, not only on him, but also, our marriage, our family. We sort of started to grow apart very quickly, which is quite natural when you're not spending a lot of time together. So it got to the point where I was working a lot. At this 6 years ago, I'd been on Creative Live. I had already sort of created some online education, and the demand for it was growing quite quickly. So it was either I give up my job or he take some time off and help me out with the children, so that obviously they weren't neglected. But it was that point in time that we decided that he would take 12 months off without pay from work and join me, and I basically had to make my business succeed in a way that it would cover all of our, financial, like mortgages and car repayments and just even being able to afford childcare and groceries and things like that. So it was a stressful period of time, but that was 6 years ago now, and he's still with me, still working with me. And whilst it did take a long time for him to find his feet within the business, obviously being a baby photographer and him definitely not drawn to babies, it sort of didn't take a lot, I suppose, for him to kind of, pull away from the photography side of things and then focus more on the business side. And yeah, he's now running our marketing department with our online education. He is a part of the small business team with Facebook. There's 22 of those on that particular team. And so he works quite heavily with them. And he's just a genius when it comes to obviously understanding, that side of everything. So yeah, once we sort of found our true strengths and weaknesses within ourselves for our business, we just started to take off, and we haven't really looked back since. It's been fun. There are some days we get a little sick of each other when you work and live and breathe everything that you do 24 hours a day. But I think the most important part is that we're really good mates, and if we have a disagreement, it's usually over and done with within a couple of minutes, and we move on in terms of business. So yeah, it's probably the best thing that we've ever done, other than have children.
you've got something that so many photographers need, and that's to have Rob in their lives, because he is a marketing genius. I mean, he and I had a few conversations that weekend. We were all together out in California, and Facebook couldn't be more confusing, and trying to understand the algorithms and how to find the right target and how to promote yourself the right way and do it economically, or at least in a way that you've got a decent return on your advertising investment. He really knows this stuff. I was just kind of blown away, because Shamir and I have talked about it. Neither one of us have a really strong background in it. We're working with Platypod, and we're both involved with Platypod, who has somebody who knows this side of the business really, really well. And I can spend a half hour on the phone with him and still not understand a big portion of what it was he just explained that he's doing. I understand the results. I understand where we started. But having a partner in the business like that is just, it's so great, because the two of you do complement each other, so that you can play your strongest suit, he plays his, and together you've become a powerhouse.
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
And it's funny because we always sort of laughed and joked about how quickly his brain works. He's on a different level to most people, so not often can anyone keep up with him when it comes to just having a general conversation. But he does operate in a different mindset to most people, and he's definitely a numbers guy, and I think that's kind of what you've got to have to basically understand the socials and how they actually operate.
It sounds like you two are the dynamic duo, for sure. For sure. So Kelly, hearing your passion for what you do and looking at your portfolio, it's obvious that you are an expert with connecting with your subjects, and specifically these cute little babies and the mothers too. And hats off, much respect to you. Full disclosure, I am not one of those people. Growing up, we did not have a lot of small kids in the family. I don't have kids now. I don't do newborn photography. And so looking at your work, I am in awe. Your work it's fine art. It is. And I would love to hear tips that you have, or how do you connect? How do you build relationships with mom before the shoot and even during the shoot, and these little babies? How do you connect with them to get these outstanding images?
Yeah, and it's funny because I think a lot of people who come into the baby sort of photography world, they assume that it is all about the baby, and you're so accurate when you say about connecting with the mums, because for me that's where it all is. Mm-hmm. And I have to make them obviously feel as relaxed as I possibly can, and create an experience that I know they're going to enjoy and remember. Because for those of you that have got children, you remember that first day that they come home from the hospital, and you don't take your eyes off them. You become quite sort of obsessed with every little detail, getting to know them and wondering, what sort of person they're going to grow into, and their little personality and things like that. So when parents come to us for their shoot, they're often seeing their baby held by a complete stranger for the first time. Mm. So there's a lot of trust and confidence that you've got to build in terms of your relationship with the client to be able to, to create the photographs that they're paying you for. So for me, it's all about, empathy, I suppose, is the key word here, because they go through a lot. A lot of people don't have the nicest or easiest pregnancies, so you've obviously got to emphasize with what they've been through. And then when you welcome a baby, often the delivery is not always as pleasant as some, so you've got to empathize with that. And then when you're taking that baby away, you've got to also be very understanding about how they feel, and potentially if their baby cries, how it makes them feel, all of that kind of stuff. So for me, it's about understanding them, what they've gone through, and being able to obviously connect to them on that level, and communicate what it is that I'm about to do to photograph their baby in terms of how I position, how I handle, all of that stuff. So yeah, communication is king, but it's empathizing with the client and just being understanding. And it's I always remembered, when I first started photographing babies, what a joy it was to be surrounded by people that were just so in love. When you photograph weddings, it's very high stress. There's a lot of people involved, and there's so many different elements going into one event that it's often not that enjoyable to be a wedding photographer. And when you're doing family portraits, you've usually got mum yelling at the kids to behave, and that's also high stress and things like that. So when people come in with their baby, they're just so in love, because there's absolutely nothing that can prepare you for how you are going to feel when you meet that baby for the first time. And for me, that's probably what I always found so enjoyable about it, was just being in such a wonderful sort of space with new parents and how in love they really were. So as long as I can continue, I suppose, to connect and communicate with them on that level, I've got a job, which is amazing. And yeah, it is truly an honor when people obviously trust you enough to hand over their most precious thing, which is their new baby. So yeah, there's definitely an art to being able to pose and position and all of that. But for me, it's all about client experience and creating something that they're going to remember for a long time, not just with the physical prints that I provide them, but also that experience and how they remember it.
I'm just curious, what are some of the challenges that you've had over the years?
Oh gosh,
there had to have been a couple of horror stories that just you didn't think you were ever going to get the image you wanted.
Oh, absolutely. And a baby, when it comes in, it has its own agenda that you can't tell them what to do. You don't know what you're going to get on any given day. Really, they could be unsettled because they're obviously in some form of pain from wind and things like that, or they could just be irritable because they've been overhandled or overstimulated prior to the shoot. So, and sometimes when parents are a little stressed, a little tense, the baby feeds off that energy. So yeah, there has been some fun experiences. I do recall one baby and it was a little unsettled, and the parents sort of said to me, yeah, it hasn't really gone to the toilet for a few days. It's a bit constipated.
Oh.
And I do recall at one point watching the wrap that I had around the baby grow as it finally went to the bathroom. And it just didn't stop. It kept going and going and going. So yeah, there are those perks to what we do, but at the end of the day, it's really not that bad. Like when you understand, I suppose, the baby and how to kind of communicate with the parents and how to handle them safely, which is obviously paramount with every session that we do. It is always a very enjoyable experience. But yeah, you do get.
What's your cutoff, and in terms of age, when we talk newborns, how do you define what's the age of a newborn?
Do you know it's funny. I prefer obviously to photograph them in the first couple of weeks, but I don't like photographing them in the first week, because that's that time when the parents are creating that bond and feeding and things like that. Mums are usually waiting for their milk to come in, so I prefer to photograph them, sort of around that 2 to 3 week mark. But in saying that, I just did a workshop. I was in Chicago and I had a 5-day-old baby come in, and it was awake and unsettled the whole time. And then I had a 5-week-old baby come in, and it slept the entire time and let me do anything that I wanted to. It's always, I think, just a bit of luck, I suppose, with finding that perfect age. But obviously, the longer they are outside of the womb sort of environment, the more alert they become in terms of handling them, and they grow quite quickly. So yeah, usually around sort of that 2-week mark is probably my preferred age, but you can photograph them obviously much older as well.
I've got a quick sidebar off of that. Any difference in temperament between boys and girls?
Oh, girls tend to be, for me, I always say, they're a little stroppy. They can be quite sassy, and boys just love to eat. Yeah.
Yep. We don't grow out of that either.
No, I have boy girl twins, and I can tell you it's pretty true.
Oh, that's so funny. Kelly, you mentioned your workshops. I'm curious, are you noticing any trends when you're teaching other newborn photographers who are new to the craft? Any trends where they struggle with it?
Do you know, I think it obviously they fall in love with the idea of, being able to photograph babies because it is an art, and it is a challenge at that same time, obviously to be able to perfect that. But I think a lot of new photographers come in with the idea that, they're going to learn how to pose and position a baby, but unfortunately they don't realize that it's the experience, it's the time, I suppose, that you spend doing it with, like with anything, that you really do get better at it. So I noticed now, as opposed to say 10 years ago when people were learning, the difference in time. I mean, people are creating amazing photographs with babies, often with their sort of second and third newborn shoot, whereas it took me probably about 5 years of doing it to really see an improvement and notice my photographs getting better. But now with the amount of information that's out there and the knowledge and the teaching that's available, both in person with workshops and then online with tutorials, people are learning it so quickly. But I think for them, it's just understanding that it does take time, and you do have to be patient in terms of knowing where to place your hands and how to support them and understand their needs. So it's obviously very different to being able to communicate with the bride and groom and, creating a great experience in that sense. But with babies, you basically have to become, I suppose, an expert at handling something before you even pick up the camera, which is, I think, what a lot of people struggle with, understanding that it does take time to learn that.
Well, in our instant gratification society, I am so glad you mentioned the patience factor, because it's so easy to look at other amazing artists, such as yourself, looking at your work, and it's magical. And I love that you acknowledge the fact that you put in the hard work to get to this level, and that it took experience and time, and that learning how to handle the baby is as important as knowing how to handle your camera. That's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, since you were talking about teaching and workshops and what you're teaching, I'm curious, as you were getting started, who were some of the photographers, people that mentored you along the way? Who was, I mean, you really haven't been at it if you think about it. You're an overnight, what we say, about a 14-year overnight success.
I've had a lot of patience.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's funny when it comes to being mentored with newborn photography, I haven't been. So that was, back in the day, I suppose, me just studying photographs of how babies were, positioned or lying and things like that. And like you said, it's that time and the experience, I suppose, that you learn from every single shoot. But when it comes to all the other different aspects of what we do as photographers, I've been mentored by so many incredibly talented artists, I suppose. But I've been mentored by Sue Bryce. I've been mentored by Rocco and Cora. I remember the very first photographer that I ever followed was Jerry Jonas. So I remember buying a packet of his pickpockets back in 2006, and being obsessed with trying to learn as much as I could off the back of every single one of those cards. And for me, I suppose, I've even gone and done seminars with Tony Hewitt, learning about composition and all those different sort of key elements in terms of capture. So I think, what probably led me to, sort of be a bit more unique than most other baby photographers was the fact that I went outside my genre to be mentored along the way and focused on the other areas of business, as opposed to just being solely dedicated on baby photography. So yeah, I've sort of grabbed a lot of information from different people and made it my own, I suppose.
Well, it's interesting because everybody you just mentioned, I knew about Sue Bryce, and I was hoping you were going to mention Sue, but everybody you mentioned, the common denominator between all of you is an incredible focus on the experience, on what you bring to the client. It's not just about being able to capture a great image. It's not about post-processing. It's not about what you do and how you're going to print it or anything else. It really is creating that experience for the client. Everybody you just mentioned has a reputation as an educator, as an artist, for creating that experience. And I remember doing a podcast with Tim Walden from Kentucky a few years ago, where Tim talked about, you're not selling a canvas portrait. You're selling an experience that a client can look back on. And
Absolutely.
in fact, the print becomes almost secondary. And it really isn't when you think about the fact that a lot of the work you're doing, Tim's doing, in fact, everybody you mentioned, you guys are creating family heirlooms that are going to be handed down to future generations. It's very cool. It's all part of a unique club of, quality and passion and professionalism.
Yeah, totally.
Only don't tell Jerry that, because I'll never hear the end of it.
I think, what you just mentioned there about creating those family heirlooms, though, is for me at the moment with my own children, it's quite scary to think that when they have their children and they become grandparents, that they're potentially going to live in a printless society because people aren't printing their photographs. So I think, from my own personal sort of family experience, the importance of creating those family heirlooms and printing those photographs so they can be passed down in generations is probably one of the biggest focuses I have at the moment in terms of education and showing photographers what they can create and how valuable they are for our future.
Kelly, just to switch gears a little bit, although this is still related, I wanted to touch on marketing a bit. And it's related because if you weren't good at marketing, then you would not be taking these stunning images of these beautiful babies. And so how do you get the word out as far as bringing in new clients?
For me, obviously we're very good at social media marketing, things like that. But when we talk about that client experience, word of mouth is always going to be the best way to market your business. And for us, the referrals that we get from previous clients far outweigh just the random inquiries that we get online from people who just come across our website or see an ad or something like that on social media. So for us, that relationship, I suppose, that we build with our current clients and how we maintain that relationship is what's always been and will continue to be the best way for us to market our business, because we want those clients who really do value what it is that we create. And for us, it always comes from referrals. One of the first questions I ask people when they come into the studio, if I don't know already, is how did you find out about me? And I can say safely that it's usually about 85% of my clients that are referred by someone else, which is pretty amazing.
Well, that goes back to the relationship building with clients too.
Yeah, totally.
Well, we are almost out of time. I've got one more question for you before Shamara hits our usual favorite closing question. I know in talking to both of you and also mutual friends we've got, I heard some amazing things about your studio. And I think it's another piece of diversity that so many photographers only look at their work and don't think about, well, what if I could make my studio different and perhaps offer it to photographers that had other specialties, could do other things. Just take a minute and describe your studio for the listening audience. Like, how many square feet?
Oh my gosh, I'm not great with feet, but I do know square meters.
Okay.
Here in Australia. But so we actually we bought a building 3.5 years ago, and the front part of the building was it's about 400 square meters. So it's a 2-story building. So that's where my studio is. So downstairs, I've got 200 square meters for my own shooting space and my viewing rooms for when clients come back for their, to see their photographs. And then we have upstairs our office where all of our staff work. We have 4 full-time staff members at the moment and 1 part-time, which is fantastic. And then at the back of that building is a warehouse, and that's 1,200 square meters. So we've divided it into 3 bays, and one of those bays is a purpose-built commercial studio space. It's I'm trying to think of the actual shooting area. It's large enough to drive a semi-trailer, a truck inside it to be photographed or filmed. It's soundproofed, so we have a lot of filming going on in there. We've hired it out to people who do TV commercials. We've done music videos. We just had someone in there yesterday filming. It's Danny Green, the boxer. He owns in Australia a franchise gym which is called 12 Rounds, and he's doing online education because of the sort of pandemic that's happening at the moment in terms of exercise. So they're creating a lot of videos in that sense. It has a commercial kitchen. It has a loft area where people can obviously view. It has a soundproof booth, so any audio can look out into the studio from behind. Two big panels of thick glass, so it's completely soundproof. And I'm trying to think what else. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, it's getting hired out a lot, and we're sort of building it, I suppose, for our future in terms of some form of retirement. So when we start to slow down as we get older, we're still going to generate an income from photography, from the film industry, which is really exciting.
Well, one of the things that photographers just don't do is look forward and down the line, and to diversify like that, not just within photography, because usually we talk about diversity and it means brides, babies, pets is the top 3, and working with the same client and being there when you continue, as the bride and groom start their family, then you want to be there. But you've taken it such a step further and moved into diversity within imaging, period.
Yeah. It is exciting actually to see other businesses come in and use the space and what they're creating. It's actually inspired me in so many different ways, with my own personal photography. So I love seeing what people come in and do.
And Kelly, you mentioned the pandemic, and actually, let's touch on that before we get to our favorite last question, which, Skip, you can ask that question if you want. You can take that one.
Okay, I'll take the next one.
At the time of this recording, the pandemic is happening, and there's no getting around it. And so we were curious about the impact of it in Australia, and also with how you do business. How have you kind of adjusted?
Do you know, it is very scary what's kind of happening at the moment, and then it's very we're all sort of living in very uncertain times in terms of how long it's going to take to come out the other side of this, and how it will really affect businesses. But small business owners right now, obviously, photographers in general, which is what I deal with on a daily basis, they're very scared because people are cancelling sessions and events and things like that. So there isn't a lot of income or work about at the moment for photographers. So we're just trying to, I suppose, within our own community, really try to keep that morale high and keep them focused on what they can do during these down times, instead of, focusing on the media and the hype and becoming sort of obsessed, I suppose, with things not working out or going broke or, losing their businesses. We're just trying to keep them focused on what they can do to make their, build, I suppose, the foundations and structures of their business stronger, so that when they do start getting back out there and shooting and booking more clients, then they can hit the ground running, essentially. But yeah, we've got a community online, a group, and we're just going live every day in there, trying to give them, some information, some tips, some tricks, and just try to keep the whole mood, I suppose, positive. and keep people focused, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. We're all going to struggle, and obviously not just photographers, but any small business owner is going to struggle throughout this. So as long as we can support each other and create that positive environment within the community, I think we'll be okay. But it is kind of scary what potentially could come from this.
Well, that's such a good point and such good advice. And let's wrap it up. And I hate being out of time, but let's wrap it up with our favorite question, which is, what advice would you give a new photographer just starting out today that wanted to photograph newborns?
Oh, wow. I think I've already mentioned it. Be patient. Focus on safety. Learn all the different safety aspects about what you should and shouldn't do with a baby, and build relationships with your clients. But yeah, probably the most important key is to be patient, that's for sure.
And Kelly,
great advice.
Wonderful advice. Where can folks find you online to check out your amazing work?
So you can find me at newbornposing.com. I've also got another website, which is kellybrown.com.au. And yeah, on Facebook, just look up Kelly Brown. You'll find me.
Awesome. I will look for you, actually.
Yeah. Or come to WPPI in 2021, and I'll be walking through the halls as I always am.
That'd be great. That would be great.
With a trail of munchkins behind you. It's like the Pied Piper. They're, everybody there is so in awe of seeing you at the show that it's tough to get you alone for 2 minutes to talk. You've got your fan base is right there, all your groupies.
It is. It's funny when people call it a fan base, because for me, it's about putting a face, obviously, to a name, to people that are part of the online community that we've created, and it is very exciting to be physically standing, I suppose, in the same space with someone that you spend so much time online interacting with, and it's a lot of fun. But I mean, this probably better than anyone, Skip, but when you get out from behind your computer and you go to events and you interact with people face to face, and you become part of an experience like WPPI or all of the other photography events that you can go to, you create friendships that will last, for the rest of your life. And yeah, it's a pretty amazing experience. And I think more people should do it, get out there and become, obviously when there's no pandemic, but become part of more of those events instead of sitting behind their computer.
Well, you get no argument out of me on that one.
Yeah.
So cool. And Skip, where can folks find you online?
You always ask the same question, and it's always the same answer. Everything I write is at skipcohenuniversity.com, and you'll find me Skip Cohen on Twitter and Skip Cohen on Facebook. Nothing particularly creative there, just my name. And we always want to encourage our listeners, if you've got somebody you think we ought to have on, or you've got a topic you'd like us to discuss, my email is skip@mei500.com. And the question I always ask you, Shamira, is where do they go to find you?
Folks can send me an email at shamira@photofocus.com. That is my first name, which is creative, CHAMIRA @photofocus.com. Yes, send us your questions, your ideas, your feedback, because the feedback that we get absolutely shapes how we move forward with this amazing show. And speaking of amazing, Kelly, thank you. You are awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great.
Great stuff you shared today, and a lot of just really good insight.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
And we want to thank our listeners for joining us as well. Please tell your friends about this podcast, especially if they have the burning desire to improve their photography business and hit the ground running when this pandemic stuff is over. We look forward to having you all with us next time on the Mind Your Own Business podcast, brought to you by Photofocus and Skip Cohen University.